And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. Well, that was a shellacking. Conservatives across the state pretty much took it on the chin yesterday. But, I wanted to talk to you this morning. Oh, by the way, welcome to the program. And just give you a fair warning, I've got a couple of meetings that I have to go to today. So this morning's program is going to be very much abbreviated. But I didn't want to have a primary election like that and then leave you hanging. I wouldn't do that to you. And so we're going to have a very much truncated program. And then we'll pick it up and really dive into the election results yesterday, or that happened last night. The truth is, and I don't think that you can make any, put the studio dog out here. There's no other way that you can spin this other than conservatives got shellacked. Now, there were a number of factors that went into that, and I'll discuss some of those in just a minute. But the broad strokes of it is that conservatives across the state, not all of them, but conservatives across the state got beat in a big way. Wyoming politics works very much like a pendulum. And, the further a pendulum gets pushed to in one direction, it follows violently to the other one. And, just think about it. You pull it one side and then it's going to swing all the way over there. And that's what happened. You see, in the 2022 and 2024 elections, conservatives made huge gains and unprecedented even. We went from, 12 or 14 conservatives all the way up to taking the majority in the House of Representatives. That was huge. In fact, I think that it was the only time that that's actually happened in Wyoming history. That is when that conservatives have taken over one half of the legislature. And so that was a big shift. And, and so big so that it was, I guess you could probably refer to it as a mandate. I probably referred to it as a mandate on the program. And so those conservatives that got elected went to work at what they promised their constituents they would do. Follow the Republican Party platform and push for more conservative policies. No one can deny that this state, for a very long time, has spent like a drunken sailor. Well, that's not exactly true, as Ronald Reagan aptly pointed out, that it's pretty unfair to sailors because the sailors are spending their own money. You see, for years, Wyoming has spent the taxpayer dollars like it was water through a sieve. And so a whole bunch of conservatives get elected, and they set out to do exactly what they had promised, trim government back and right size it, enact policies that followed the Republican Party platform. And so they did that. And but one way to think about what happened yesterday is a bit like The Empire Strikes Back. Now, the lovely Christine is not a Star Wars fan, and in fact, she calls it space talk. But in the first one, A New Hope, the rebels seemed to be doing pretty good, and they made some gains. And then in the second movie, The Empire struck back in a big way. And that's very much the same thing that happened in Wyoming 2 years ago. It was very clear, at least to me, that the redcoats, the progressive wing of the Republican Party, and that's really what they are, is progressives. But they were caught on their heels. They didn't really believe that conservatives were going to take power in 2024. They didn't really believe that the conservative ground game had swollen to the size that it was. And they lost in a big way. Most of their people got taken out. In fact, almost all of their leadership went with them. And so, if you remember the movie, it doesn't turn out very good for the rebels in the second movie. But then there's the third movie, and that one was Return of the Jedi. Now, what I'm telling you here is that in the 2024 election, the redcoats, the establishment progressive Republicans, they didn't know what hit them. Well, this time they were ready, and they used the progressive machine to the hilt. Now, it didn't really help that the media is entirely on the side of big government. That's what you saw. How many articles have you seen on the last 2 weeks that referred to the check incident, what they call the Checkgate thing, which, by the way, is still a constitutionally protected expression of free speech. But how many articles did you read? Or Facebook posts, well, not just Facebook, but social media posts that referred to Checkgate. Wildfile even wrote an article that said that anybody who cashed a check, even after the legislative session was over, was somehow involved in Checkgate, which, of course, is preposterous and absurd. But they tried, and they did a very good job of it. The media, and if you're ever, if you have any doubt that the media is not entirely in the tank for the progressives and the establishment Republicans, you have to remember that most of the newspapers in Wyoming are funded largely by tax dollars through legal notices. It wasn't that, a few years ago, I did kind of a back of the envelope study of just one paper in Wyoming. And I figured up just in the legal advertisements, not including oil and gas, but just the publishing of salaries and the minutes of meetings and court notices, that it equaled out to about $100,000 a year. Wow, in just legal advertising. Well, almost every newspaper in Wyoming is the same way, and so they're largely funded by tax dollars. Now, if you're not, a print newspaper, but you're an online source, well, you still get a heck of a lot of money from government sources. Just look at the advertising from any of the establishment media outlets, and it's all sorts of lobbying organizations, and there's nothing wrong with that. I absolutely nothing. That's capitalism at its finest, but still, it benefits the media in Wyoming to be on the side of the redcoats, and they were. I'm still looking for the article that is complimentary of any conservative, and I still haven't found one. Now, if you want to, you want to look at, if you want to find one that's critical of any conservative, that's pretty easy to find. So the media didn't help either. And you had a coalition of a whole bunch of progressive groups. And it's hard because they all have names that sound pretty good. Like, the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. Okay, they sound pretty conservative, right? Standing up for agriculture, those sorts of things. But when you get down to Cheyenne and you meet their lobbyists, well, they're definitely in favor of every sort of big government. There was the Wyoming Business Alliance. They dumped a ton of money into the election. And then one outfit that I saw repeated ads from was Wyo Business. I'm not exactly sure who they are quite yet, but still in the same realm. And so there was a coalition of progressive groups, the media, and a huge amount of money from political action committees that combine to equate an absolute, and let's not even paint over it. It was a butt kicking. So I don't think that we should gloss over it, except to say, and I want you to hear me now, that in politics, this always happens. The Republican Party has been around for a very long time, and there have been many elections where Republicans have been swept out of office. Can anybody say Obama? That happens. And then the pendulum swings back the other way. Now, what you saw is the pendulum being pulled all the way back here in 2024. And we did get a lot of work done, election integrity. There were some spending measures curtailed back, the Wyoming Business Council. We did some good work. The 25% tax cut, that was huge. And that's going to continue. The work of Brent Bean, that's going to be on the November ballot, which I'm pretty sure that that's going to pass. But the further you pull the pendulum this way, when you let it go, the further it's going to swing the other way. But it will eventually come back. And what I'm telling you, my friends, is that politics is not unlike any other sport. Think about my beloved Texas Rangers. In 2023, they won the World Series. Nobody thought they were really going to do it in their season. I mean, they were playing like crap at the end of the season. And then they won the World Series. Well, the very next season, you would think, coming off of a World Series win, you would be knocking things out of the park left and right, quite literally. But they didn't. In fact, they pretty much stunk in the 2024 season. Season. And so what I'm telling you is that politics is a pendulum and that it always swings back the other way. So don't get discouraged. I mean, I know it's a discouraging morning for all of the candidates that put a lot of work into the election. But in elections, there's candidates that win and there's candidates that lose. And in this case, a bunch of our guys lost. But that doesn't change the principles, my friends. Okay, so we got it handed to us in an election. But that doesn't mean that we stop fighting for the things that really matter, like the right to life. Nobody has a right to kill another innocent human being. That's a cause that we can't give up on. We can't give up on capitalism and the free market. We can't give up on creating smaller government. That's actually an oxymoron, by making government smaller and less intrusive. We're about to experience 2 years of where government is going to expand rapidly. Now, what you saw last night, I know that there are some media outlets, and I was just kind of skimming through them this morning. There are some that are saying, well, it's the true Republicans took over. Well, yeah, it's true that they are Republicans, but most of them don't vote with the Republican majority. Most of them voted with the Democrats. Now, in the next 2 years, it's going to be really hard to figure out who's voting with whom. But the truth is, my friends, that it will always come back. And just like my 2023 or 2024 Texas Rangers, just like the allies in the movie, there's always a movie after The Empire Strikes Back. And okay, so we got it handed to us in this election, and you should absolutely let those candidates take their victory lap. But don't ever forget that it wasn't winning an election that convinced people to run. It wasn't winning an election that caused people to sit down with their families and say, you know what, I really want to run for election, and I really want to put our name out there. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, especially with the media being as pervasive as they absolutely are. And so it takes a family decision to do that. Just think about all of the episodes and articles that I published about not so conservative candidates. I mean, that's not fun to go through. It's all true, but it certainly isn't fun to go through. But the reason why you made those decisions was not just to win an election. It's because you believed in the principles of the Republican Party platform. Those haven't gone anywhere. Those didn't lose. They're still as strong and stalwart as they always were. Now, it is incumbent upon all of us that had to go through last night to stand up for their principles. And so what I'm telling you, my friends, is don't freak out. Don't panic. It's not time to panic. In fact, what it is time to double down. They're going to take their victory lap, And it's going to be an interesting 2 years. But it's our job now to hold those individuals accountable. They said that they were going to help Wyoming business. Okay, let's make sure that they do that. There was all sorts of claims. I mean, I've got, they aren't in the studio right now, but I've got a whole stack of mailers from all sorts of candidates that said they were going to do a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, well, let's make sure that they do it. And we have to make sure that they don't do crazy things like Medicaid expansion. What I'm telling you is, all right, so this is just 9 innings out of an entire season. And the season is long when it comes to standing up for liberty. And so don't panic. Trust me, when it's time to panic, I'll tell you. Right now is not the time. Right now, the time is to remember why we ran for office, remember why we put our families out there, and to stand up for conservative principles. Now, I know a lot of you, I mean, the comments are just pouring in, so let me just grab a couple of those. So one of those is, who will the GOP support now that there is a rhino running as the as the Republican Party? Now, I'm certain that Chris is referring to the governor's election. So let me just run through those numbers real quick. Eric Barlow ran away with it. He beat Megan Felder by 20,000 votes. Actually, it was really close to 20,000 votes with 58,820. And Megan Felder was next with 38,793, and then Brent Bean got 30,843. So, okay, he pretty much ran away with it. Now, the good news, though, comes in the form of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. Harriet Hageman, of course, won that election by a little bit shy of 50,000 votes. And it's very reminiscent of Liz Cheney, if you ask me. And then in the U.S. House, Chuck Gray won that by, looks like about a little bit more than 6,000 votes. That was a lot closer than a lot of people thought it was going to be. I always knew that it was going to be a close race, and I was kind of thought that Chuck Gray was going to pull it out. So we've got Chuck Gray and Harriet Hageman as our federal representation. We didn't fare so well with the top 5 electeds. Robert Short, the former county commissioner, he won the Secretary of State's race. Harshman is going to be the superintendent of public instruction. We're really going to have to hold that guy accountable. And then Kurt Meyer won the treasurer's race. And, by and large, when it comes to money, Kurt Meyer did a fair job. It's just voting for all the windmills and being in Mark Gordon's hip pocket that I disagreed with. And then we get into the state legislative races, and there's no sugarcoating it, my friends. No sugarcoating it at all. We got it handed to us. And probably the one that kind of surprised me a little bit was the Senate District 1 race. I kind of thought there was a good chance that Chip Nyman would pull it out. But old Augie, he's been in there since 2011, and he was able to, win that election. Let's see here. Let's go to another comment here. So let's see here. Mark, Councilman Moody from Cheyenne says, together, Degenfelder, 28.1%, Bean, 25.6%, captured over 53% of the total primary vote, indicating that a unified conservative candidate theoretically could have surpassed Barlow's 44.8%. That's a really good point. Let me put it up there so you can read what Mark says. That's a really good point, because typically what conservatives do in elections is we have more than one candidate. And in this case, it's interesting. There's an interesting article written by Don Marquardt on the Open Range Record, and it's talking about the 3 pools, or the 3 groups of voters. I think she calls it pools. But Eric Barlow definitely had captured the left, and this was going into the election, right? So, and she says, well, Megan Felder is in the middle, and of course Brent Bean is on the right. The folks that are going to vote solidly for Barlow were not going to vote for Brent Bean, and vice versa. And then Megan Felder was in the middle, trying to grab votes from either side. But if you only had one candidate, Mark is exactly correct. Theoretically, a one conservative candidate could have won that election, and most likely would have. So now there's an interesting question here from Chris. Put this one up here. Who will the GOP support now there is a rhino running as the Republican Party? That is a fascinating question. Now, go all the way back to the GOP endorsements in the last election. So if you listen to this program, you knew that I was not really all that in favor of endorsing candidates. I think that the party absolutely has the right to do it. I think that it's absolutely free speech, and I find it ridiculous that that Wyoming is one of two states where the state of Wyoming pretty much controls what the Republican Party can and can't do. But endorsing those candidates, it brings up an interesting question now. Absolutely, Eric Barlow is the Republican nominee for governor. So the question is, what will the GOP do? I cannot see a world where members of the Central Committee would endorse Eric Barlow. I think probably at best they probably just won't endorse anybody in that race. But it's a fascinating one. And of course, we have my pal Rebecca Bextel, who's running under the Constitution Party. That too is uncharted waters. I have no idea how that's going to turn out, except to say that historically, it's an uphill battle for third-party candidates. It's not unprecedented. I mean, we did have a new guy named Abraham Lincoln that did it. Was the first Republican president. So it's a fascinating dynamic, I guess you would call it. I cannot wait to talk to Chairman Miller and see exactly what they're going to do there. But absolutely incredible. All right, my friends. So let's go into some of the very dismal results from last night. I already mentioned that old Augie pulled it out by about a little over 200 votes. And the same pretty much holds true for across the state. Now, there were some races that were closer than others, but for the most part, conservatives pretty much got beat. So in the Senate District 15, Wendy Schuler won that one by 1,500 votes. That's pretty big. Former, definitely big-time redcoat R.J. Cost in Park County won that by a little bit less than 400 votes. R.J. Cost, if you're a longtime listener of Cowboy State Politics, you'll remember the episode where I found a video of Nate Martin, who is the head of Better Wyoming. We all saw plenty of advertising from that guy during the election. Well, R.J. Cost, Mike Sullivan, were caught on video, and I'll go back and pull out the video so I can give you some sound bites of it. But I caught them on video discussing how they could get more Democrats elected. So that's R.J. Cost. Melissa Butcher beat Agent 29 by about 1,000 votes. That one was huge. Now the mailing and the support for Melissa Butcher was absolutely incredible. Americans for Prosperity dumped 14. I got 14 mailers at my house in support of Melissa Butcher, a tremendous amount of money. And you know what? While I'm there, let's talk about the money for a little bit. There's been a couple of articles in the last week saying, well, Make Liberty Win spent $500,000. Actually, it's a little bit more than $500,000 in this last election. That's all the dark money. That is nothing in comparison to what the coalition of the establishment associations and their political action committees poured into the state. Now, I cannot wait to see the final number from Americans for Prosperity, but the number that the Cowpie and Wildpile are going with is 234,000. I think that's on the low end. But let's just say 230,000. That combined with the so-called common sense Republicans for Wyoming, the abortion mailers, WYO for Business, the Wyoming Business Alliance. You add all of those up together, and my guess is it's going to make Liberty Win look like a kind of a small number. Like I told you at the top of the program, that there was a coalition of the insiders, and there always is. The establishment Republicans, progressive organizations, and they always get together. It just so happened in this election, they were on their game. And so the fundraising is another interesting thing that we'll probably be talking about for a couple of weeks once all the numbers come in, because of course Americans for Prosperity is a federal PAC. It's not a state PAC, so they don't publish their numbers in the YCFIS, the Wyoming Campaign Finance Information System. Also, if you look at the fundraising for a lot of the progressive candidates. For example, Melissa Butcher raised $60,000 in that race, and I think 12,000 of it. I'll have to go back and look. Maybe I've got that graphic still. No, I don't. But like 12,000 of it was from political action committees. The same thing kind of holds true in the House 29 race with Micah Sturdivant. She raised, I think it was like $7,000 or $8,000 from political action committees, but it made up over 25% of her fundraising. And so, and if you look at just about every race across the state, that same number holds true, because it was the same progressive organizations that were donating to candidates. So better funded, they had a better organization. And let's just be completely honest about the ground game of a lot of conservative candidates. Obviously, we got outplayed. I mean, that is evident. Now, the other side, the Redcoats, they had a lot of help, but there was a serious amount of us getting outplayed in the ground game. Now, there were some conservative candidates that did win. Abby Angelos, she won her bid for Senate by, it looks like 400 votes, something like that. She defeated Dwayne Dillinger over in Gillette, so Abby Angelos will be going to the Senate. Let's see here, Bob Ide. So this one was kind of a trade-off. Senator Bob Ide, lost his seat to Lisa Engbritson. I'm going to have trouble with that name for the next 4 years. Evie Brennan won her seat against Daniel Singh. Troy Claycomb, and now we're into the House races. Troy Claycomb beat Zeta Anderson by, pretty much 1,000 votes, a little bit less. A win for the Conservatives. Earl Collier won his House race in House District 3 over in Campbell County. He beat Annie Ziegenhorn by just a couple hundred votes. Tommy Strzok was able to retain her seat in Converse County. She beat Jim Willix. Now, that was an interesting race to watch, because Willix put out a couple of Facebook posts seriously criticizing the fundraising from Representative Strzok. And I mean, his argument was, well, most of it comes from outside Converse County. Well, a lot of Jim Willix's fundraising came from out-of-state PACs. So I don't know which is worse, an out-of-state political action committee or people that actually live in Wyoming. But Tommy Strzok was able to win her seat. And Luke Reiner, the former YDOT director, the guy who's had a plan to put charging stations along. And it was a Biden administration thing, so he was kind of following through. But Luke Reiner went across the state advocating for charging stations along all of our interstates. He beat Steve Johnson by more than 1,000 votes. Eggsy Brown, he got beat in District 9. That's Landon Brown's former seat. And then we got some other ones. Now, one really interesting one. Now, in House District 18, that's Majority Leader Scott Heiner's district. His opponent, Kenneth Roberts, had a stroke and was in the hospital. He may still be in the hospital in ICU, and he still won. Now, that one's going to be interesting because there will be, unless he has a John Fetterman-like recovery, I don't know what's going to happen there. Most likely the county GOP is going to have to nominate somebody for that seat. So anyway, Kenneth Roberts won. He was the guy that we did an article on him on the Open Range Record, where he, instead of introducing himself to his to his constituents, he pretty much just attacked the Freedom Caucus, and evidently it worked. And I got to give some credit to the lovely Christine. For months, she's been saying, "Hey, you know what? If you're anywhere in the vicinity of the Freedom Caucus, you're in trouble in this election." And obviously, she was right. You hear that, honey? You're right. Moving on. Let's see here. Joe Webb got beat by Chad Stevens. That was, let's see here, 400 or 500 votes. Chicom Som, Albert Sommers, won his election big time, 2,063 to 719. So Chicom Som is going back to the House. Nina Weber got beat by 1,000 votes in Park County. Another win for conservatives. Dalton Banks won his election handily by, it looks like, 1,300 votes. That's in House District 26. Let's see here. And I already told you about House District 29. That's Micah Sturdivant. And Mark Jennings lost his election 1632 to 972. That was a really big blow to conservatives. Mark has been in the legislature. Well, he lost his last election, but he was in the legislature for 10 years. And then John Bear, the chairman emeritus of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, he lost 920 to 647. That one surprised me a little bit. I thought that John Bear would pull that one out. Christopher Drizang down in Natrona County beat Tony Locke by a little over 300 votes. Let's see here. Jamie Lean, also in Natrona County, got beat by Robert Henry. Marilyn Connolly. Oh, man, I cannot. I was really hoping I would not have to listen to her for the next 2 years, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to. She beat Mark Jones by exactly 1,000 votes. I don't know. That one looks a little sus if you ask me. And then the same holds true pretty much for the rest of them. With the exception of House District 51, Lori Bratton, conservative in Sheridan County, she beat Susan Bigelow, thank God, by just under 200 votes. And then and probably the closest one that I've seen was House District 52. That's over in Campbell County. That's right now, Rhonda Bowler has it 914 to Bill Fortner's 906. So that one is definitely going to a recount. And another win for conservatives, Christopher Knapp over in Gillette won his race by 300 votes. And then the rest of them, so like Lloyd Larson, he won. Elisa Campbell, oh joy. Julie Jarvis won her race by under 200 votes. And Bill Allemand pulled it out by 25, 26, 27 votes. J.R. Riggins won in House 59. House District 60, Tony Nemec won over Marlene Brady by almost 2-1. Andrew Server, I don't know much about him, but he beat Seth Bard in House District 61. And then the last one, House District 62, Kevin Campbell handily beat Edith Allen in that race. So that pretty much gives you the rundown of all of the races across the state. Now, county parties, I'm still digging into those. It looks like in Sheridan County, conservatives will still control the Sheridan County GOP. And again, all of those, I'm going to have to dig into those and find an answer for you. So, all right. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to finish up the program. Back in a minute. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
This is Brent Bean, a Republican for governor. Wyoming families know what matters: law enforcement, emergency services, and supporting strong schools, agriculture, and energy production. But state government keeps growing while priorities fight for resources. That has to change. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. Vote for me on August 18th, and I'll put Wyoming priorities first. I'll return taxes to you, the taxpayer, and make Wyoming number one. Paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Wednesday after the 2026 primary election. Thank you for watching the program. I really appreciate it. Thank you for everything you do for Cowboy State Politics, the podcast, and now the Open Range Record. I've got a couple of articles I'm going to publish this afternoon, but again, it's got a couple of meetings I got to go to, so look for those. A couple of them, one of them is just kind of a recap of what happened during the election last night, and then the other one is kind of my thoughts on the whole thing, and we'll have more coming when probably today and tomorrow. Now, I want to address one comment that popped up here, and claiming that a lot of conservatives won in this election. No, they didn't. And how do we know that? Because being conservative means advocating for those ideals that have always worked in this country. And those are not hard. Free markets. We believe in life. We believe in the Second Amendment. We believe that parents are the best decision makers for their kids, that the traditional family is the best place to raise a kid. We believe in lower taxes, that taxes should never be any more than is absolutely necessary than to secure the proper role of government. That's it. The government doesn't have any place in business, and when it does, it screws it up and it picks winners and losers. Conservatism is easy. It's all in the Republican Party platform. And how do we know that a lot of the people that won in this election are not conservatives? Because they advocate for things that are diametrically opposed to all of those things. If you're going to vote for higher taxes, if you're going to vote for things like allowing people to just kill young babies, if you're going to vote for things like letting the government play around in the free market and pick winners and losers and give tax dollars to people who didn't earn it, if you're going to advocate for allowing illegal aliens to run rampant in this country, or more gun restrictions, or any of those, or Medicaid expansion, or that the government has anything to do with health care, you are, by definition, not a conservative. And it has nothing to do with the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus did not invent conservatism. Conservatism was been around a lot longer than anybody in the Freedom Caucus. It just so happened that those people were in favor of conservatism. So don't get it twisted. Conservatives did not win in the election last night. A whole bunch of big government progressive candidates did. Now, let's not get it confused. All you have to do is go look at their voting record. And you can probably pick any number of bills, and you'll find out exactly who those candidates are. Like Albert Sommers, the guy who kept numerous bills protecting children in his drawer. And let's talk about Eric Barlow. He's not a conservative either. I mean, the guy's record on life issues is horrendous. When he was in power, when he was the Speaker of the House or in a chairman role, just about every single pro-life bill he could figure out went in his drawer. When he was going to be on the record, that is when he couldn't avoid it, he'd try to kill the bill on the floor. And then when it was obvious it was going to pass, he'd put his name to it. And see, all of those details you can't find out unless you go look at the actual voting record. So don't fall into the stupid trap, and it is a pretty sophomoric one to say that all of these people are conservatives. They're the real conservatives. That's a bunch of hogwash. Man, if you're going to vote with the Democrat majority most of the time, you're not a conservative. And it's not hard to figure that out, Jordan. If 5 out of the 6 Democrats are voting one way and you vote the same way, you're voting with the Democrat majority. Plain and simple. I mean, it's not hard to figure out. And so don't even buy any of the rhetoric. A lot of these people, they show up on our doors, and a lot of them did this time. I don't know how many mailers I have from Melissa Butcher claiming that she's a conservative. And then you look on her website and it says she's absolutely in favor of elective abortions. That's not a conservative position. And if you're the person that's advocating for that, you don't know what you're talking about. Conservatives didn't win last night. Conservatives lost. And the folks that did win, most of them are definitely not conservatives. And so, again, what you saw last night was the pendulum swinging back the other way. Well, the good news is it always comes back the other direction. The truth is that America, by and large, is a center-right country. And Wyoming, by and large, is a center-right state. And the people of Wyoming are largely conservative. It's just the folks that run for office, most of them are not. And it's not hard to figure out. Look at Micah Sturtevant in House 29. A lot of her mailers said, one of them said, people, not platforms. I mean, obviously a rejection of the Republican Party platform. Healthcare that meets us where we are. The government doesn't have any job in healthcare. I mean, it's not the role of government. Nowhere in the Constitution can you find anything that says anything about healthcare or in the Wyoming Constitution. So, no, conservatives did not, a whole bunch of conservatives did not win last night. A whole bunch of conservatives did get shellacked, however. That's undeniable. So, you know, let's just be completely and perfectly honest about what happened last night. And you've got to look at the facts. You've got to look at the positions that a lot of people held, and don't get confused and don't buy the rhetoric. The truth is, there were a lot of people that stayed home last night. A lot of people didn't go to the polls, even though in Sheridan County, you know, what I heard last night, though I don't have any numbers on hand, is that, you know, that there was a record turnout in Sheridan County. But if you look in other counties, the turnout wasn't that great. So we'll have to look at the turnout. And again, you know, I don't have any numbers to look at. It's been kind of a busy couple of hours. Great comment by Jerry. Being conservative is not just a word. It's a lifestyle. Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, in the main point that I want to get across in today's episode, short episode as it is it's not time to panic. Don't worry. I'll tell you when it's time to panic. All right. Now, is it a time to kind of lick our wounds a little bit? Sure. Yep. But we got to examine why it is that we lost. And there's a couple of easy reasons. One, you had a coalition of progressive groups. You had a lot of money that was poured into the election. And I think it's fair to say that conservatives didn't have the ground game of their opponents. All of those things deserve reflection. But remember, the Republican Party has been around for a very long time. And we've had elections where we've won, and we've had elections where we've lost. But don't forget, the pendulum always comes back the other way. And, you know, I understand that if you're, and, you know, and let's hear a comment on there. Maybe a lot of people are just singing the post-election day blues. Okay, yeah, I'll admit it's kind of a bummer that we didn't win big yesterday. But this isn't a time to back down, my friends. Now, and here's the other thing to keep in mind. You got all these people that just got elected. They all swore to you that they were going to be conservative. They all campaigned. They all sent you stuff in the mail over and over and over and over, telling you that they're conservative. Hold them to it. Hold them to the Republican Party platform. That's why we have it. And, you know, and look at the federal level. Our congressional delegation is rock solid with Harriet Hageman and with Chuck Gray. I mean, they won the election. And you know, it's interesting. You know, the down ballot races, usually when the big candidates win, that also translates down ballot. I find that very, very interesting. I also find it interesting that a lot of people won their precinct races, but lost their precinct in the election. I find that very interesting. All I'm saying there is there's a lot of data to pick through, and there's a lot of things to figure out. Not only just to figure out why a candidate won or lost, but to try to, you know, do a, you know, if you'll pardon the word, I don't want to use that word. We'll use to do a study of what happened in the election. You know, that was a big story in the mainstream media after the last presidential election. The Democrat Party didn't really do any sort of, you know, self-reflective study to figure out why they lost. I mean, they didn't do that, which is why you see all these socialist candidates at the federal level winning elections. And make no mistake, we've got those candidates here too. They're just a little bit better hidden. But you know, I mean, we got beat, but that's not a reason to feel down. Okay, maybe take today, lick your wounds a little bit. But now it's your job to hold all of these people accountable. And for this program, I got to tell you, my friends, I cannot wait for more. And think about it. How long has it been since I've had a fantastic soundbite to tell you about? Like this one.
Oh, I think you got to stop and take a look at what you're doing here. I speak against this because it kind of reminds me of that fairy tale, Cinderella.
Yeah. How long has it been since we've had a great soundbite like that one? Well, now that the Redcoats, and this is not good, but now that the Redcoats are in charge, and they are, they have the House and they have the Senate and they have the corner office in the governor's race. But now that they're in control, there's going to be so much material to hold them accountable with. And it's, there's positives and there's negatives. And we just got to be honest about what it is. And so just remember that politics is a pendulum, that it swings both ways. And this direction, it didn't go our way at all. But it will swing back. And what'll happen is when all of these big government progressives start raising your taxes and spending more money, and they throw a whole bunch of cash behind the Wyoming Business Council, and they start taking your tax dollars and socking it away instead of letting you have it, and they open up abortion, which they most likely will, and they're probably going to try to go after your Second Amendment rights too. They will probably try to repeal some of the Second Amendment legislation. I think that would definitely be at their political peril. But don't be surprised if that happens. And it's, so what I'm going to work on this afternoon after I get back from a couple of meetings is that I'm going to do a little bit more in-depth study of what happened. I think that there's some interesting races. I think that there's, and just one of them, right? Look at the House District 30 race, Mark Jennings. He didn't win a single precinct, including his own. Yet, he got elected as a precinct man. So he won the election for his precinct race, but he lost it for his House race. Not a single precinct in Sheridan County did he win. Same holds true for Representative Pendergraft. He didn't win a single precinct either. And so I think that there's a lot of interesting things that happened last night. Most of those we don't know right now. But I can tell you this, that it's not time to panic. It's not time to freak out. What it is time to do is to examine why it is that we didn't win, to acknowledge that we got our butt handed to us, and that is without a doubt. But to also remember that the folks that won the election are not conservatives. Most of them do not believe in the Republican Party platform. Most of them don't even know what that is. And so it's our job to hold them to it. All right, my friends, I've got to go to a couple of meetings, and I'm glad that I was able to sit down and visit with you for a few minutes this morning. We're going to pick this back up tomorrow morning, and we'll do a much more in-depth study. Coming later on this afternoon, I'm going to have the Cowboy State Politics podcast, and I'll go into this in a little bit more depth when I have some more time. So thank you for coming out this morning. Thank you for watching. Thank you for showing up and voting, even though things didn't go our way. Last thing I want to tell you, my friends, it isn't the principles that lost. It's the candidates that lost. The principles are timeless truths, and those don't go away. Just because we lost an election doesn't mean that those go out into the ether. What it means is those things are still true, and it means that we still have to advocate for them. And just because our candidate lost, that doesn't mean that our job is over. There was always a third movie, right? There was another one after The Empire Strikes Back, and I can tell you for a fact, my friends, that there is much more to come. So, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson. This is Cowboy State Politics. I gotta run, my friends. I will see you tomorrow.